Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another online service at Crosswinds. We're so glad that you're with us today. In just a couple of moments, we're going to have a time of worship, and could I encourage you to just prepare your heart, prepare your mind for this time. Maybe just still the noise that's going on, take a breath, and be ready to engage with God and be ready to receive what He has for you today.
For the start beyond the end, as far as east is from the west, measureless. From open sky to ocean depths, more than man can comprehend. Measureless. Your love is without limit. Your love is constant. Your love goes on forever. Your love is endless. Your love is overwhelming. I can't contain it. Your love is endless. Oh, how vast and oh, how wide, far beyond all space and time. Your love is without limit. Your love is constant. Your love goes on forever. Your love is endless. Your love is overwhelming. I can't contain it. Your love is endless. No death, no height, no fear, no shame, no lie. I am convinced, even the grave could never separate. No death, no height, no fear, no shame, no lie. I am convinced, even the grave could never separate. Your love is without limit. Your love is constant. Your love goes on forever. Your love is endless. Your love is overwhelming. I can't contain it. Your love is endless. Your love is without limit. Your love is constant. Your love goes on forever. Your love is endless. Your love is overwhelming. I can't contain it. Your love is How can I say it is well when my voice can barely speak? And how can I sing you a song in the midst of suffering? Jesus, Jesus, will you meet me here? Let your peace wash over me. 'Cause I need you now more than ever. Teach my soul to sing. My God is still in control, and still He reigns on His throne. Though mountains may tremble and sea billows roll, I'll sing, it is well with my soul. My God is still in control. You have not left me alone, though the world has let me down. All of my sorrow and pain, I will trade it for a crown. Thank you for staying with me when the night was closing in. Whatever my lot, you still got. I will sing again. My God is still in control, and still He reigns on His throne. Though mountains may tremble and sea billows roll, I'll sing, it is well with my soul. My God is still in control. Wherever you are, I want you to sing this out, sing aloud. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though mountains may tremble and sea billows roll, I'll sing it is well with my soul. My God is still in control. My God is still in control. No matter what happens, in every circumstance, God, your promise is perfect. Oh, your promise is perfect. Sing it as well, 'cause it is well with my soul. It is well with my God, that is a promise that we hold on to, Lord. Even when seas rage around us, Lord. When things are dark, when our skies are stormy, Father God, when we're worried, when we're surrounded, when we're beset by fear, we know we can look to you, God. Because every detail is under your control, God. Every detail is under your control, Lord. Nothing can happen that surprises you.
Well, that video that you just saw expresses our deep gratitude for those in essential lines of work, those who have continued working during this to help the rest of us be safe and to help the rest of us carry on as normally as we possibly can. I want to give a special thanks to those of you in our Crosswinds family who are part of that team, part of that group of people who are continuing to work, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're a delivery person, whether you're in a grocery store, whatever that is. We are thankful for you, and we want you to know that we're praying for you. We value you, and if there is any way that we can come alongside you and your family during this time to make things a little easier, to carry your load a little bit with you, we would love to do that. You can reach out to us through care@crosswindschurch.org, and we'll be able to come alongside you in some more tangible ways. Thank you so much for how you serve us. We couldn't be more grateful. Well, I am standing out here in front of the Eden Garden, and the Eden Garden is one of our ministries that has continued during this time. We've had teams of volunteers coming out to harvest these organic vegetables, and we've been donating them to a food bank in the East Bay. I bring it up because this is a place where maybe you haven't been to yet, even though you've been here on our campus. So the next time you're here, can I invite you to cross over the bridge, take a right, and come check out this beautiful location. Right now, I'm hearing birds chirping, and those aren't sounds we're piping in, those are actual birds chirping. So we hope that you can consider taking a look at Eden Garden and maybe even being part of this ministry. Well, we're going to continue with our service here in just a moment, but as we do, I want to again thank those of you that have adjusted your giving to be online, who have continued to be faithful to support this ministry during this time. As always, you can give online through our website, you can text the number that's on the screen, or you can mail in your offering. And our hope is that as you do that, as you click that button on your phone or put that stamp on the envelope, that you will know that the way that you're sacrificially giving is allowing us to continue ministering to you and to this whole area, to continue with the work that God has called us to, even though it's looking a little bit different lately. So thanks for your faithfulness. We hope you enjoyed the service, and again, we're glad that you're here.
Hey, Crosswinds, good morning or afternoon or good whenever you're watching this. I hope today this service finds you healthy and energized and excited to hear what God might have for us in this time together. So, if I asked you to guess what size the largest church auditorium in the world was, a church auditorium, you remember what that is? It's like what we held our services in until a few months ago, or what some churches call a sanctuary. If I asked you to guess how many seats the largest church auditorium in the world holds, what do you think that it could seat? How many people do you think the largest church auditorium holds? Would you say 5,000? Or maybe you've seen some churches on TV that are in what used to be basketball arenas, so you might guess closer to 16, 17,000. That is huge, by the way, an incredible size. Well, believe it or not, the world's largest church auditoriums are actually in the country of Nigeria. This is a picture of Deeper Life Bible Church. Their auditorium seats 130,000 people. That is incredible to me. Obviously, this picture is only showing you a portion, but oh my goodness. Here's another one, just down the road from it. It's called the Mountain of Fire and Miracles Church. They named their auditorium Prayer City because it's like a city. It holds 500,000 people. That is nuts. We only have 361,000 people in the Tri-Valley. By the way, that's including San Ramon, Danville, and Alamo. Can you imagine a building that would fit all of us and leave room for the entire population of Hayward? That's what fits in Prayer City. Okay, one more. If you think that's big, check this out. Another Nigerian church, Redeemed Christian Church of God, can fit 1 million people. Look at how huge that thing is. If you think Disneyland is crowded at capacity, which is like 85,000 people, imagine a church with 1 million there at a time. Let me show you the inside. This just looks claustrophobic. Communion alone would take 2 days. Well, I bring that up because, as you can see today, we're shooting this sermon, I'm teaching from outside our auditorium. There's a couple of reasons. One, I figured why not change it up a little bit, but two, it actually has to do with what I want to talk with you about today. Last week, I sent out an email with a link to a podcast or an audio file where I explained why we're not holding our large gatherings in person again right now. Even though some churches have been kind of bucking the county health restrictions and meeting anyway, you know, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, all that, I explained why we at Crosswinds felt it wasn't wise to do so right now. And I received overwhelmingly positive feedback from so many of you. I don't want to go into all of our reasoning again today. There's plenty of explanation on the recording. Please listen to it if you haven't yet. But I also said on the podcast that soon we would be revealing our plans for in-person gatherings again. And today is that day. Now, to be clear, I'm not telling you that we're holding in-person services again next week. We are not. But my plan today is to outline for you a little bit of what Crosswinds is going to look like when we finally are able to start gathering in person again. Before I do that, because this is our normal sermon time, let me do a little bit of teaching, all right? And I want to explain to you why gathering in person matters. Because with all the positive feedback, there might be some of you that say, why gather at all? Why not wait a few years if we need to? There's this moment in Matthew 18. Jesus is talking to people about how to handle disputes, or specifically what to do if you see someone in sin and you need to confront them about it. And he says, just go to them by yourself and bring it up one-on-one. But if that doesn't work, take one or two other people with you the next time. Anyway, he closes this little teaching moment with this line right here, verse 20, for where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. In other words, Jesus says, the reason it's worth having a few people together that are followers of mine when you're doing something of significance is because when you gather 2 or more, I am with you too. Now, it is worth you knowing there was a widely known, very similar Jewish saying that everyone hearing Jesus would have been familiar with at the time. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the screen right now so you can see how similar it is. Where 2 or 3 are gathered to study God's law, God's presence is among them. That saying right there, where 2 or 3 gather to study God's law, he is present, that was known by everyone. So when Jesus says, hey, if 2 or 3 gather in my name, I am there, it is a big deal because Jesus is giving them a clue. He calls himself God to those people listening in that moment. But that kind of takes us away from why I'm bringing all of this up. Doesn't this concept raise a question for you? If God is everywhere, why in the world does Jesus say, I will be with you when you gather? Those of you who've heard this verse before, let's put it back up. Has this struck you as odd? Why say, I'll be with you when you gather if God is everywhere? Does this mean God is not with us if we don't gather? And what about Jesus' words at the end of Matthew, the same book, where he says, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Which is it? He's with us always, or he's with us when two or more gather? Well, I think Jesus is with us always. But I think what he's saying in this two or more thing is that something special happens when the body of believers, even just two, get together in his name. Something different happens. Something powerful happens when we gather in person in his name to follow Jesus. Now, that's not to say that that thing can't happen online. Good things happen when we gather online. But there's a reason that we are not exclusively an online church. It's because there is something powerful about gathering. When I was in high school, I used to work at this outdoor amphitheater, kind of like Shoreline here in the Bay Area, but this was in Chicago. And I worked backstage loading and unloading band gear from trucks before and after the concerts. And so like here, you name an artist that was touring in the summer of 1988, I probably unloaded their gear and watched their show. INXS, Whitesnake, Kenny Loggins, Metallica, this is all 88, Depeche Mode with OMD at the same concert. And I got to go for free to whatever shows I wanted and watch from backstage, or sometimes I would just go down to the front of the house and I would watch from there. And I remember not being a real John Mellencamp fan. That would be John Cougar Mellencamp to some of you, depending on when you came of age. Anyway, I got there early one night to watch the last 10 minutes of his show, and I was blown away at the energy of the crowd and the in-person experience of his songs. Like, I'd heard all of his songs on the radio, but watching him play them live and watching the crowd sing along to Ain't That America for You and Me, or I Fight Authority, or ROCK in the USA, the big closer, I liked him way better after seeing him and his fans gather. There was an energy and there was a response. There was a group response. Another band like that was Midnight Oil. In fact, even more so, a totally different thing to see them live. You would watch a band at soundcheck and you would be like, I don't get it. And then you'd watch them with their people, and it wasn't even about the band. I would just look at the sea of people singing along and dancing along, and I would be like, this is different. All right, I wonder if it's not like that with Jesus. I believe what he's saying here is something special happens spiritually when we gather. Let me show you another passage, one of my favorites. This is in Acts 2. It's describing what life was like for the early church. And here's what it says in verse 46. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. Okay, get that. It says every day the church would gather and meet with each other. Every day. Now, why does it say this? Because in their society, groups, they might get together monthly, maybe weekly, but you had to be pretty radical people to do something daily. If you did any group meeting daily back then, you were hardcore. In fact, the only people anybody in their society saw daily was their family. Wait a second, ding, ding, ding. What this means is the early church saw each other as family. They were not just part of a club or a little society or a group, the Rotary, the PTA, the Lions. They were a church family. And here's where I'm going with that. While a family can gather online together, family is better when you get to be in each other's presence, right? I know you believe that because it's why you fly across the country for Christmas if you can afford it. It's why I drive 6 hours for Thanksgiving. It's why many of you are breaking the quarantine to see your grandkids even though you're not supposed to. Because family in person is better than family on FaceTime. All right, one last passage, Hebrews 10:25. It says, do not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. All right, the church at this point in Hebrews was facing all sorts of persecution, and that was keeping some Christians from meeting weekly. They were saying, you know what, it's easier to not get together, it's safer, let's wait it out until the persecution is over. But the writer of Hebrews says here, actually, church family, this is worth doing. This is not something to forsake. And he says, because it can actually be encouraging to you in this dark time. This could be just what you need, gathering. So, as much as we will not be having our big mass gathering anytime soon, there is something to meeting together and gathering in person. I believe in the power of being together, which is, by the way, why I've given my life to this thing called the church. It's part of how we get encouraged and we stay united and we do family. But the big question that comes up is, when the time is right, what does in-person look like these days? And how do we do it safely? Now, before I share our thoughts on that here at Crosswinds, can I just say that what's complicated about this is that so much of in-person gathering has to do with comfort levels right now, right? Everybody's got a different comfort level with what they're willing to do in the middle of this pandemic. I was talking to somebody on our staff who has not stepped foot into a grocery store in months. They have their groceries delivered to their door. They're not comfortable with going shopping. But then we've got other people that are going to the beach and they're going to parks. By the way, did you know that Dolores Park in the city has painted circles on the ground that you can sit in, like socially distant from the next person over in their circle? Point is, some would be comfortable with that right now, others would not. I was picking up food from a restaurant here in Livermore the other day. It's a restaurant that has a bar in it that is usually very crowded, very populated. And the restaurant was doing curbside pickup, and so I pulled up and I texted the number to let them know that I was there. And as I looked over, I saw some of the regular customers from the bar, about 5 or 6 of them, all with their pickup trucks backed up to each other with their tailgates open. And since the bar was closed, they met in the parking lot with their own drinks, and they tailgated, no masks. Obviously, these guys are ready for crowds again. Also, ready to get arrested for public intoxication. But everybody's going to have a different comfort level with what kind of in-person thing they're willing to experience in the coming weeks and months. And some of that has to do with your own immunocompromisation. Probably the longest word I have ever said in a sermon. Some of it has to do with who you have at home. Some of it has to do with who you've already been exposed to or plans you have coming up. I just tell you this before I walk you through our plans for Crosswinds to say that some of these things will not be for everybody, and that's okay. There's no judgment on not coming to these things. There's no judgment on coming to them. You don't know what somebody else has going on. But we've kind of put together a plan that will share what in-person gatherings would look like when they start to happen on this campus again. And we've created kind of an incremental strategy to get us all the way up to doing church the way that we used to. Now, one more thing before I walk you through these increments. We don't know what steps that our county and our city will take. Trust me, this is a moving target. As of the time that we film this, our state has allowed for churches to meet as long as they don't go over the maximum of 100 people. But here's the thing, can we be honest? It's not because it's safe to do that. It's because churches have been clamoring to meet in person, and the state gave in. I'm filming this on Wednesday, but on Thursday, I have a Zoom meeting with a few local pastors in the Alameda County Health Department. By the time you watch this, the county could agree with the state and open churches to 100 or less, or it could make the maximum number 30 or 15, or it might say, churches, it's still too dangerous. You cannot assemble at all. This is changing daily, sometimes hourly, as we talk to our sources, so keep that in mind. We're taking our cue from the county, and here's what you need to know. We will not be doing anything that they don't say is okay. And in most cases, because we're a larger church and because we care about your health and your safety and our neighbors, we're going to actually be a few steps behind what they're telling us we're allowed to do. All right, here's what we're thinking. We have an amazing 35-acre campus with lots of outdoor space. And we don't believe that church happens in an auditorium. We believe that something special can happen when 2 or more gather anywhere. Our understanding from reading health guidelines is that when it's safe to meet again, your safest space is outdoors. We have outdoors. We have lots of outdoors, and we love outdoors. So here's our plan. We know that once the shelter in place is lifted, some of you are going to begin wanting to get together with friends again. And you'll want a nice, clean, breezy outdoor space to do it. And the first phase toward opening up our campus for in-person gatherings is opening up and creating outdoor space for small groups to meet. Now, as we say that, we know that some will be real comfortable with this. Some of you already are. I've noticed a few groups that have been sneaking over and using the courtyard the last month or two. Don't think we haven't seen you. Some of you are going to be real comfortable with this, and some of you won't, and that's okay. But we've always believed that church is not just a Sunday service, right? It's community. Church is what happens when 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 gather and talk about what's going on in their lives. So we're going to be creating socially distant outdoor spaces for you to do that. Here is our plan to keep them safe and clean. Again, all meetings are going to be held outdoors. Alcohol-based hand sanitizer is going to be available at marked locations throughout the campus. In fact, we didn't plan this, but I happen to be standing right next to one that's already been installed. We've got high-touch surfaces around here that are going to be sanitized every single day using cleaners that are approved by the CDC. Chairs for those small groups will be sanitized before and after every single group meeting. Those chairs will be set up before a group can even come on campus and meet, and they'll be placed like 8 feet away from other chairs in the group. We thought it better to go a little further than 6 feet, but you can still sit close to people in your household, right? We'll ask you to keep social distance from other people while you're on our campus. Your group is going to need to reserve space so that we can make sure that it's set up for you and that it's been sanitized. And we'll ask that anybody who's exhibiting any kind of symptoms will stay home. We've identified places in the courtyard you can do this. Places on the back patio behind the exchange, places in the grassy areas. By the way, if you use the grass areas, you can bring your own lawn chairs. Then we don't need to clean them or set them up for you. Back by the Eden Garden, in the Knot Barn, on the basketball court, we have got 35 acres. Finding outdoor space will not be a problem. Now, here's the bad news. There will not be kids care for you or your group if you choose to gather. Because, as I said in the audio podcast last week, kids do not do social distancing well. And we know that that's going to limit who's able to be here meeting on our campus in their group. But for the safety of your kids, who we love, and you and others, we just can't do it. That said, our KidsMin staff is working on some stuff that you can come to as a family, and you can stay in your car while you're at it watching it, or somehow do it another very safe, socially distant way. So keep your eyes out for their ideas as we get to gathering phase 1. Again, gathering size phase 1, it's about 10 or less people, and our campus opens for small groups to come and meet. And real quick, I was thinking about this whole thing, our quarantine and our shelter in place. If I could do it all over again, I would create a quarantine. I wouldn't just stick to my household, the 4 of us, but I would find like 10 or 15 people that I would covenant with. Like, we make a contract with each other. We're going to hang out from time to time in the quarantine, and we're exclusive to each other. We're going to see nobody but each other for the entire period, but at least we get to see more than just our household. And if you keep your end of the deal, I keep mine, we'll all be relatively risk-free from community spread. When we are allowed to be with people not in our household again, wouldn't you agree it's going to be with people you trust? You're going to say, I feel more comfortable doing that with these people than with those people. All right, we want to create space for that. Now, I am not going to be suggesting this quarantine idea to the county as a future policy for their health department. I'm just saying at Crosswinds, if there's a phase 1, it ought to be small and consistent with people that you trust and with people who are the same people each week or each time you gather. And that's what this would be. All right, let me give you gathering size phase 2. When I was a kid growing up in church, it is really different than the kind of church Crosswinds is, or more and more churches are these days. It had what I would call a medium-sized group. Crosswinds in churches like it, we tend to do 2 things pretty well. We do big and we do small. The big event, like a normal Sunday service, which can be quite the production, and the small group, which is what I was just talking about. But medium-sized groups, something in the middle, they don't really exist outside of occasional events around here, or they exist for kids and students, but not adults. Well, they used to in traditional American church. I was saying, I grew up in church, and we used to have this thing called Sunday school. The idea was that before you'd go to the worship service, you'd go to a class, usually about 25 people, and you would do a more in-depth Bible study. Somebody there would teach, and it might be a class that's based around a topic or an age group or whatever. And by the way, these were for adults, not just kids. When you hear Sunday school, you might think kids. I'm talking about these things that were for adults. Actually, churches realized adults didn't want to go to school, so they started calling them adult Bible fellowships. Anyway, that kind of fell out of fashion in the last 50 years because people got busier and people did not want to go to church for 3 hours every Sunday morning. And because smart people realized it was not a good philosophy to have people listen to a lecture for an hour in a class followed by a sermon in an auditorium 15 minutes later. For most people, one message on Sunday is enough. But what these classes did well was medium-sized gatherings. Well, while we continue to record our online service like the one you're watching right now, and I should be clear, we will not stop doing this until we can all gather in person again, and even then, we've always put our normal services online. But I was saying, while these online services are going to keep happening every week, in Gathering Size Phase 2, we're going to be offering classes on Sundays for 25 people or less, classes. And actually, right now, we're working on having 4 class-type experiences ready to go for when our Gathering Size Phase 2 comes. We've got Dr. Steve Girali, who'll come up every single Sunday and begin a 4-week class on how to read and interpret the Bible. Jody is currently working on a class all about grace. Sarah, who's our small groups pastor, she has a master's degree in counseling. She's going to be offering a class on mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health, balance. And the way these will work for somebody who's comfortable, again, this isn't for everyone, these classes will be something that you have to register for, so we make sure that we don't have more than what's safe in the setting. And they'll go for 4 weeks until we start up a set of new classes. By the way, there will be no charge for these classes. They'll be happening in addition to our online content. And here's what's real important. These will be held outside because we know that it's safest outside in these really beautiful settings on our property. The one I'm in right now is one that we call the Creekside Patio. We can do another class in the Knot Barn. We can do one on the Exchange Patio. Maybe one in the lobby with all of the doors open. And because safety will be our priority in Gathering Size Phase 2, just like it is now, and just like safety will be the priority in Phase 1, we'll be following all the same social distancing and sanitization and safety protocols that we are with small groups. One more thing on this. It's being led out by Jody Tay, our associate pastor, and these classes are actually part of something that we've been working on for over a year now that we are calling the Creekside Center for Spiritual Formation. I am so happy to finally get to say those words to you, Creekside Center for Spiritual Formation. Jody and I are going to be doing a series of podcasts on this thing we're opening called the Creekside Center, so you can find out more, but if, as you register for any of these classes, you start to notice Creekside verbiage, that's Jody. That's us. And it's something that I cannot wait to tell you more about as the year progresses. If you miss having something to attend on Sundays or you want to get back in the rhythm of coming out here on Sunday, these classes will be for you. Okay, Gathering Size Phase 3. If the small group thing is kind of our 10 or less strategy and the classes are 25 or less, we've come up with a Phase 3 that for now we're thinking will be 50 or less. Now, to be clear, that is subject to change as we get more information from the county and we figure out what's safest. We know that one of the things that the online experience cannot replace is live worship. And for the last 6 months before the shelter in place happened, our worship team had been putting on these events called Barn and Branch. They were just these much smaller than a main service gatherings where people would come and sing worship songs and get an extended time with the band that we don't really get to do on Sundays. Well, Gathering Size Phase 3 for us is to bring back Barn and Branch on a weekly basis in a socially distant, safest possible way. And we think that probably involves 50 people or less. Again, reserving your space so that we don't accidentally end up with more than is safe. And we think it involves doing that outside. Right now, I'm standing right next to our Knot Barn. Some of you are married in here. And it's a wonderful space, and it might be a place that we do Barn and Branch, even as planes fly overhead like they are right now. But this barn, it even might be a little bit too enclosed. We got a little ways till we get to this Phase 3, But for those who are comfortable, we're working on a way to bring back live worship every week in the safest possible way. It likely will involve you wearing masks. It likely will involve our singers having plexiglass in front of them to shield you from their droplets. Even if we make sure the front row is 20 feet away, there's still lots to figure out about how to do that safely, where to do that on campus. But phase 3, we'll get to do live worship together again, which brings me to gathering size phase 4, this auditorium. In Crosswinds phase 4, this auditorium is where we're going to hold weekly recordings of the service that will be put online, and the plan is to do it with no more than 100 of you. Now, phase 4 is not like what you were used to 3 months ago, 3 services, tons of people all in our room. Phase 4 for us is 100 people or less, incredibly spread out through this auditorium, and it will be less of a church service and more of a live studio audience for what will be put online. In fact, I like that. Gathering size phase 4, live studio audience. And just like in the other phases, those spots, those 100 spots would be reserved so we don't have too many people come. And again, all the same safety protocols apply. We can fit around 1,000 people in this room, so you can imagine how far apart we can spread 100 in phase 4. We don't know when it will be wise to reopen the auditorium to our normal worship experience with as many people as possible, but what you need to know is we can't wait to do that, but we're not going to do it until it's safe. We won't do any of this until we can do it with as little risk as possible. Now, our teams are working on creative ways to do more than just engage your kids online, right? Or your students. We haven't talked about them too much yet. And here's what we know. Children, like I said before, especially little ones, they don't social distance. They're terrible at it. So even when we have a phase 2 class or a phase 3 barn and branch or a phase 4 studio audience, we will not have children's ministry as we used to. And unfortunately, we're going to have to be real strict about not bringing kids with you to those things. We'll be recording a few podcasts this week talking about the different strategies that both our kids and students ministries will try as ways of engaging your kids in more than online gatherings. We want to do so much more than online for them. And we're going to try to progress through their own stages soon as well. So stay tuned for that. At least now you know the plan for the what and the how of getting together in person again. We still do not know the when. Here's what I want to ask of you. I know this is hard. We all just want to get back to normal ASAP. We want in-person gatherings for you because we know with gatherings comes encouragement and unity and the feel of family. But more than that, we want safety for you and health for you. So what I would ask is for you to consider what you can put into your spiritual experience right now. And in light of what we've talked about, once these phases get started, what will you put into that? Whether it's in person or even staying online. Maybe you're not in a small group yet, and you can start that right now. We have groups meeting on Zoom. Maybe you'll decide to join us in one of these classes when the time comes, or Barn and Branch, or you're going to come help us record the service in phase 4. Here's what we know. What you put into this community, in person or online, is what you'll get out of it. Let me pray for you in this church before we go. Can we do that? Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this wonderful place that you have created here, these 35, 36 acres that you have given us. And so before we do anything else, God, I want to thank you for that. And then I want to ask for you to watch over the health of this congregation. God, not just our physical health, but our emotional health and our relational health and our spiritual health. Will you watch over all of that as we continue through this tough time? God, I want to ask for you to really do something powerful in us as we begin these very small in-gathering things when the time is right, in-person gatherings when the time is right. God, would you bring us together as a family? Would you bring us together for encouragement? And would you bring us closer to you in the midst of all of it? And all God's people said, amen. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you next week.